Congratulations and welcome to our Cornell community and our first off-campus living webinar designed for incoming graduate students to Cornell. We are live today on Friday, April 15th, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. At any time, feel free to submit questions that you may have. Please include your email address. We might not get to all the questions today, but our goal is for our office to be able to answer your questions in the coming days. My name is Julie Page, and I'm Director of Off-Campus and Cooperative Living. I am joined today by graduate students representing different fields and living in different neighborhoods, popular neighborhoods where graduate students reside. I'm also joined by my colleague, Denise Thompson, who's manager of Off-Campus Living, and you will hear from her regarding the services of our office later in this session. The goal of this webinar is for you to hear directly from graduate students at Cornell and their experience in off-campus living. Through CornellCast, we've also have for you video PowerPoint presentations to provide you with tools for a successful off-campus living experience and a successful search experience. My colleague Denise Thompson will share more about those presentations later in this session. During the first 30 minutes of this webinar, each graduate student will have the opportunity to share with you their own experiences of how they found their apartment and their housing in Ithaca, and talk a little bit about the neighborhood in which they live. You will then hear from Denise, who will again share with you the services of our office. For the last 25 minutes, we will answer the questions that you submitted. As a reminder, please include your email address with your questions so we will be able to get back to you. If you already submitted questions and you did not include our email address, you may resend them to offcampusliving@cornell.edu and someone from our office will respond to you. I'm now going to turn it over to our graduate students who will tell you their name, where they're from, their field or their department, and how they found their current housing at Cornell, but more importantly, their first housing at Cornell. And then they'll talk a little bit about their neighborhood in which they live. We're going to start with Devesh. Devesh, could you tell us a little bit about those experiences that you've had?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. I come from India, and initially I'll like to start with why I thought of off-campus versus on-campus. So the first thing normally that comes to mind when you think of off-campus is that it's a location farther off from the on-campus. It's going to be more travel. But the initial research that I did at Cornell, and I'm part of the Johnson Business School at Cornell, the initial research that I did made me realize that it's not so much the case. So off-campus locations normally are closer to the campus, and graduate housing on campus is on particular locations which are slightly further off, and you need to at least take a bus or some other vehicle to come to campus. So that's one thing that you need to be clear of, that off-campus is not necessarily farther off. It's in this case in Ithaca more nearer and is more the norm than the exception at least in the business school that I saw. I am currently in East State Street, which is about 10-15 minutes walk from the campus, and about 5 minutes bus ride from the Johnson Business School and Central Campus here in Ithaca. When I search for my first apartment, my program starts in the summer, so I searched for my first apartment, which was on East Buffalo Street, slightly nearer to my current apartment, while I was back in India. So like some of you, and I based on the questions that were submitted, I saw there were some concerns. Yes, I was back in India when I searched for my apartment. I was not in Ithaca. I did not have an opportunity to visit the apartment before I took that. The way I went about that was I looked at Craigslist, I looked at some of the resources that the Johnson Business School had, and I was able to reach out to the few people that a few apartments that I was interested in. We shared some of the pictures of the apartment, and then we signed a simple agreement, and we went ahead. And so yes, there was a bit of trust element in there, where I had to go ahead and trust that the pictures would be similar to the apartment, and believe me, the apartment have turned out to be much better than the pictures, not the other way around. And it's kind of like you would look at when you're booking a hotel. When you look at the pictures, you look at some of the things that people have said, and go ahead and book it. So that's so. I'm currently living in an apartment which is like a 3-bedroom apartment that is in East State Street. My neighborhood is very near to College Town Terrace, which is one of the popular uh, service apartment area here. But I am in a house with an independent apartment. I have a huge lawn, so I'm pretty happy because my wife was here for 1 semester. And it's a quiet neighborhood where all the different houses are located, and my landlord stays in a house just besides mine, so it's pretty convenient from that way. And even from this year we didn't have much of a winter, but even from winter maintenance problem, it is not. It sometimes made out to be more difficult than it is. It is in that case. It's not too bad. It's kind of fun actually.
Thank you, Javesh. Now I'm going to ask Jason to introduce himself, and again, his department, and where he's from, and how he found his first living experience at Cornell, and then also a little bit about the neighborhood or the area that he lives in.
Thank you, Julie. My name is Jason Kumpel. I'm a graduate student in the Electrical and Computer Engineering department. I'm originally from Rochester, New York, so just a little bit outside, about a 2-hour drive from Ithaca itself. When I was first searching for apartments, I checked out the apartments.com website and actually had the opportunity to travel to Ithaca and look at a few before deciding. I live a little bit what you'd call far from campus, although far in Ithaca is about a 10-minute drive. I'm in the technically it's the town of Lansing, which is just north of Ithaca, and I live in a complex. And what I really like about the complexes in this area and around is that they try to create a neighborhood feel. So it's almost like just outside of the complex is a suburban neighborhood. It's very quiet, not that Ithaca ever gets that loud. It's also really nice if you like or like to go running out in the neighborhood with people. In terms of getting to campus, I drive. However, there are plenty of bus stops that service many of these apartments around. And I'm just a stone's throw away from the mall and the shopping areas, which has groceries, dining, mall.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. And we'll be back to you later with questions. Veronica is our third participant today, and she'll talk a little bit about her living experience, and she had a unique way that she found her first apartment that might be helpful to others.
Hi everyone, so my name is Veronica Pillar. I'm a 6th-year grad student in the physics department, and I'm originally from Washington, D.C., or the suburbs of it, so it's about a 6-hour drive from Ithaca. But when I was first looking for apartments here, I did not visit Ithaca beforehand, but our department administrator had emailed all the incoming PhD students like a welcome letter, but we also had each other's emails and contact info. So someone else contacted the rest of the incoming class, and I'd never met any of the other people in it, but saying, hey, does anyone want to look for apartments together? We can pool up and find housemates. And I was interested, a bunch of other people were, so I think there were 8 of us split into 2 groups of 4, because a 4-person house is easier to come by than an 8-person. And we were about to begin looking when actually a professor in our department emailed the department saying, hey, I'm going on sabbatical for a year and would like to rent out my house while I'm gone. So I was lucky enough that one of the people who I still hadn't met, but who I was going to live with, lived fairly close to Ithaca and was able to drive up, meet that family, see the house, and they decided to rent it to us. So the professor's house, while he and his family were gone, is where I lived the first year. And that was great, and it was really helpful to have the contacts in my department, thanks to our administrators, to get in touch with other people in my same boat looking for housing. I've moved a couple times since then. I mean, the professor came back to live in his own house. And I now live in a house in the North Campus area of Cornell. So the neighborhood, it's about like a 10-minute walk from the physics buildings where I work and other parts of campus, maybe like 15, 20 to further parts of campus. There's also a bus lines that run right through there 7 days a week and go through campus, downtown, also up north to the mall. So that's pretty convenient. It's a very residential area, so there's not really shopping or dining or any of that in the area. But like I said, the buses are convenient, and the commute into campus is very nice and short. I know a lot of people actually who live further away and will drive in and park right on my street and then walk into campus from there. The house itself is where I live now is a 7-person unit, and it's just in a building owned by an independent landlord with our unit and one other. And I found that house from already knowing someone who lived in it, because I'd already lived in Ithaca for a bit. But a lot of my current housemates found our house through Craigslist and either came and visited the house if they were in Ithaca, or we've had like Skype meetings with future housemates who have been far away or abroad. And that's been really successful. But both for me finding housing and for them finding us.
Thank you, Veronica. We'll be back to you with So I'm now going to introduce Dolly, who will share a little bit about her living experience. And Dolly, if I remember, you are an undergrad at Cornell. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
So she had a little bit of experience with Ithaca before she was a graduate student, but she can also talk about the different neighborhoods that she lived in and how she found, definitely a graduate area neighborhood as well. So thank you, Dolly.
Okay, sure. So I'm Dolapo. Everyone calls me Dolly. I'm in the Human Development Department, studying law and psychology concentration. So I'm a graduate student now, but I was indeed an undergraduate student, so I have quite a few years of experience living off campus. So my first year, the first housing situations I found off campus when I was in undergrad, I did have the opportunity, of course, to go visit the housing, and I thought that I had to really scrutinize the place and everything like that. But after a few years of living off campus, I found that the pictures tend to be really consistent, and what is written in the lease tends to be accurate, so it wasn't really necessary for me to see the housing in person. I didn't see this one in person. I found the listing on Craigslist. So I live in the lower west campus on University Avenue. So I'm about 4-minute walk from the TCAT stop to go to campus, and about an 8 to 10-minute walk downtown across the street from the Commons, so where you would go to any of the malls or anything like that. So you could also walk to campus, which is about like 20-minute walk. So it's accessible via public transportation or via walking. So it's a very residential area here, but it's primarily graduate students reside in this part of University Avenue, and it's generally quiet. I remember one year when I lived off campus, I lived on a street across from a few fraternity and sorority houses, so my walls would shake, but I don't have anything like that. It's very quiet here most of the time. And yeah, I've never had a negative experience finding any housing here, and it's always been very easy for me.
Questions for you later. So welcome, Sonia. It's good to see you today. So Sonia is the final graduate student participant. Sonia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So Sonia lives in College Town, and Sonia will talk a little bit about her experience finding her first off-campus living experience, and a little bit about the College Town area, which is close to campus, and how she found her living arrangement. So Sonia.
Hi, I'm Sonia Saraf. I'm doing Masters in Public Administration. I'm from Pakistan, and I have lived in Ithaca for 1.5 years. It is a 2 years degree program. I'm graduating this year, but I lived 1 semester in DC on an externship program. I found my first housing through our student group. It was from the girls from were from Pakistan, and we contacted together and tried to live together. But my first housing was off campus, and it was on Slatterville Road. The buses were every 1 hour, and it was a huge house in the woods. And I wasn't comfortable there. I was a little scared at night when going there. But afterwards, I was more aware with the situation and wanted to live very close to the campus where I could easily walk. So I found on Craigslist another housing situation. It was rented by a private renter, and I visited the place and talked with the landlady and found that place. Afterwards, I have lived in College Town apartments, which are rented by Ithaca Renting Company, and it has been very reliable. And I have found the apartment where I'm living now through Cornell Facebook group for students. So it has been very positive for me, and I have had good housing experience in Ithaca, except for the first one, which was very far. House was nice, but it was not accessible. But the College Town neighborhood area is very nice. There are many restaurants. It is a very lively place. I do not feel scared even at midnight when I come from library, and it is a very good walk. I love to walk every day to my classes, which takes around 10 minutes because my human ecology department is in the middle of the university. So it is at least 10 to 15 minutes of walk from my place. So it has been a very great experience.
Thank you very much, Sonia. So you just got to hear from our 5 graduate students, and now I want to introduce my wonderful colleague, Denise Thompson, who's going to give you an overview of the service of our office. He's also going to be able to talk to you a little bit about some PowerPoint presentations. The goal of the webinar today was for you to hear from the graduate students themselves about their life at Cornell and their living experience. But the PowerPoint presentations that she'll talk about will give you an idea of actually how to do the search process in the Ithaca area. So Denise, you're on.
Thank you, Julie. So our office is the off-campus living office, and within our office we have 9 peer advisors. They're undergraduate student staff that are also here to assist you in your housing search process. On our website, which is offcampusliving.cornell.edu, we have various checklists and reference materials that you could also use. You will find on our website after this afternoon several PowerPoint presentations. We have one that's on tips, general things that I think are important for you to know when looking for housing. We also have presentations on budgeting, transportation. We go over the different neighborhoods in Ithaca. So those presentations were recorded, and you'll be able to see those this afternoon. Thank you.
And just a reminder, this webinar is also being recorded, so if you have missed some of it or part of it, or you want to watch it over, you will have a chance to view this webinar anytime at your convenience on CornellCast. So again, if you have questions to submit, please still submit your questions, and we will go to the question time now. And please include your email address because we want to make sure to get back to you if we did not get to your questions today. We've gotten a lot of questions, and we really appreciate that very, very much. So the first person to answer this question is going to be Denise, who you just heard from. Is the grad student housing on campus any good? How much does it cost? And how many people typically share a room? Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Julie. So the on-campus housing is definitely adequate housing. It's has a lot of different options to it. You'll have anywhere from a studio apartment to a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom apartment, and they can range anywhere between $930 for a studio to a 2-bedroom share, which is $815, or a 1-bedroom, which could be $1,110. Currently, if you would like to apply to live on campus, you may do so. They are actively working off of a wait list.
So that's a piece that's very, very important, that right now they have several people on hold that they're waiting to hear from for people to sign contracts, and then we'll know more what places open up on campus. So thank you. So another question for Denise. What is the average monthly cost of living in Ithaca, and think about food and rent?
So when you think about an apartment living in Ithaca, there's a wide variety of housing in Ithaca, whether it be an apartment complex or a home that's been converted into different apartments or just renting rooms. So really the cost does vary based off of what are your needs and wants. But if you were willing to live with someone, with roommates, you might be able to find an apartment at $700, $800 a month, including utilities. If you wanted to live on your own in a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom, it would probably be more along the lines of $1,100 to $1,200. But those costs, again, do vary greatly, so you're definitely going to really need to look at what your needs and wants are.
And I know for some of you, transportation is going to be a big factor in finding that apartment. As some of our participants said, we do have bus service from several of our neighborhoods. Depending upon what neighborhood you live in, will be what time the bus service ends. And that's where I know some of the graduate students that I work with, they say, oh, the bus service ends at 10:30 at night, so that makes it a little bit harder to look farther out. So I think I need to find someplace in the College Town neighborhood or someplace within walking distance to make it a little bit more easy, easier for myself. I am going to ask Jason and Veronica to answer the next questions, and we'll start with Jason because Veronica did address this a little bit. But where can I find potential roommates with similar lifestyles and interests?
So, I personally have lived alone. However, a lot of the coworkers I have, especially international students, tend to group with international communities. However, there are other ones who just mostly with your home alone. You need people to lab or your departments that you can. That's where I see a lot of them hearing.
So, Veronica, do you want to add to that?
I guess, sorry, I couldn't hear clearly what Jason said, but
it was hard for me too.
Yeah, coming from not living on campus yet, if you have anyone to contact from within your department, that could be really helpful. I know, like, my department was great about setting the first years up with each other, and they also assigned us to, like, upper year PhD student mentors that we could just have their contact info and ask them questions, like, including about housing. But if your department hasn't done that, contact the administrator, and maybe they can put you in touch with people. Otherwise, I know, like, when I've been searching for housing and posting about housing on Craigslist, there's often, like, if you're looking for housemates, people include fairly detailed descriptions of, like, what they are like, what the culture of the house is like. So you get a lot of that information there, obviously, and obviously it's a description, but that's a starting basis from which you can contact the person and talk to them. People looking for housemates are generally quite open to that.
I want to reiterate what Veronica just said, to really look to your department, because someone else could be asking the same exact question to that department administrator as you just asked. So that is a really great resource for you. The other resource for you is our off-campus living website, offcampusliving.cornell.edu. We have a listserv as part of that website, and Denise can talk a little bit about that listserv and how that works.
So the listserv is there to help you find your roommates. If you go onto our Prepare site under search, you'll be able to log in and request to be a member of the listserv. You do need a cornell.edu to be automatically enlisted. If you don't have a Cornell email address as of yet, what you could do is just submit the request and then provide us with backup documentation from your specific college or unit that you've been accepted, and we will add you, and then you'll be able to start corresponding with other students looking for roommates.
Thank you, Denise. So this goes, we've spoken to this a little bit already, but I want to ask the question in case any of the other grad students have anything to add to this, because it is a question that we do get a lot in our office, and that is about finding housing if you won't be arriving in Ithaca until late July or early August. And isn't that a bit too late? So if any of the grad students, I know, Devesh, if you want to talk about that a little more, I know you mentioned it in your approach, and then we can also talk about that, or any of the other students, please feel free to join in after Devesh.
Sure. So when you're looking for the house, in a way, it doesn't matter when you're physically arriving here in Ithaca. What matters is when you start looking for that house. So even if you're arriving late in late June or July, start looking for a house sometime in the May there, because postings start coming in, and that gives you some time to look at what all different options are there on Craigslist. And like everyone mentioned, the department that you are enrolled in, that's a very good resource, because each of the departments have their own Excel list, Facebook list, different places where they would have people from the same department who are moving out, graduating this year, posting some of those house situations. So that then allows you to look at and then start contacting people. Next step, once you shortlist some houses, would be then to look at, ask them to share some pictures, get into Skype calls with some of the prospective housemates, and then that gives you a way to zero in on what is something that you would like. Plus, there are obviously options once you decide the area, and once you start deciding the actual place, you could then go to even Google Maps and try and look at that area. Now there are street views that are available. That's something that I did. The street at which I got my house, I was actually able to use Google Maps and the street view feature to see the house that I was actually renting without being here. So thanks to technology, that option is available now, and you could even be far away and look at how quiet the neighborhood is, whether what are the kind of people that live.
Thank you. Any others that feel that they would like to answer that question? Okay, one of the things that we from our office suggest, if you have the opportunity. So one of the things that is helpful, if you can, do your apartment search early, do it now, do it in May, and find some properties that you're really interested in, 2 or 3 that you really are interested in, and maybe you just are about to sign the lease because you're interested in a certain property. If you could get in touch with your department ahead of time and ask if there is a mentor graduate student, a buddy, who can do that final look at that apartment. So you found this beautiful apartment, the pictures are great, you've talked to the landlord wants you to sign the lease in 2 days. See if you can find somebody to do that final look and say, yes, it is the perfect apartment for you, go ahead and sign the lease. That's another thing that we suggest. The other thing, we are working with some graduate students from the Graduate and Professional Student Assembly. And what they would like to do is set up some buddy systems, not just within departments, so if you have someone from your department to call, but from some of our cultural organizations. So if you're a student from China, you might be hooked up with the Chinese Cultural Association, and there might be someone there who is willing to serve as a buddy to you and talk a little bit about the neighborhoods and that apartment and go look at it for you. So that is something that we are in the process of working with these graduate students on, but we're hoping to have that in the very near future as something that could be really, really helpful. So, but we do suggest that you do not wait till July or August. So, start looking now. So, Jason, could you answer this question? How common is it for first-year graduate students to live with roommates, and are there Cornell facilitated groups to help me find a roommate?
My personal experience was to live alone, although I do know of a bunch of students who did meet up with roommates ahead of time. And one of the biggest things that I know is what you were mentioning with the cultural association, where they international students with similar backgrounds paired up.
So thank you, Jason. I know Jason was a little bit hard to hear, but he did mention that people do live with roommates, and I think you mentioned the cultural groups to reach out to them as well. So thank you, Jason. So Veronica, do you want to talk a little bit about the roommate thing again and how you found your roommates?
Sure. So I found my first roommates through, again, it was other first years in my department. So we, our administrator had emailed all of us and provided us each other's contact information. And then I guess, and I'm sure not everyone, not all the first years I knew coming in lived with roommates, but maybe most did. There were a few groups of us that broke off and found housing together. And so it was just working with other people who were in the same boat. I think someone might have even set up a Facebook group for us. I don't remember. No one uses it anymore 6 years on. But that was, so I guess, like, yes, it is common, and through my department is how I found my roommates, although there are other ways, as Jason said, just I haven't used them.
Thank you. And as we mentioned, you also can do it through our off-campus living website and sign up for the listserv to help you find roommates. And also don't feel like, oh, if I can't find roommates, it's not okay to live alone. It is okay. And there might be what you might do as an incoming graduate student. You come, you find your first living arrangement, and then when you're here a year and you have a chance to explore, you meet people, and then you might have some roommates your second year. So don't think when you come your first year, especially as a PhD student, and are here for several years, that your living arrangement has to stay stagnant. I know a lot of graduate students who do, they find a place their first year, oh, it isn't quite the neighborhood they want, but then they learn the following year what the good place is to live. So it is okay. So the other, Denise is going to answer the next question, and it's what question should I ask when looking at apartments?
Well, if you you would want to ask whether the utilities are included, what utilities are included. You'd want to ask exactly where the bus stop is, what bus route number is also there. Anyone who's renting an apartment to you should know their property and be able to help you be able to figure out your transportation needs getting to and from campus. You're going to want to find out where's the shopping, so where are the supermarkets. If you want to go downtown or to the mall, find out those locations. You're going to want to ask your landlord some reference questions about them. You're going to want to get to know your landlord and see if this is someone that you want to work with. So you're going to want to ask them how long have they been a landlord, how many properties do they own. You're going to want to ask for references, so you're going to ask the landlord, but realize that they may not be 100% prepared for this right now, but tell them that within the next 24 hours you'd really like to be able to speak to someone who is a current tenant and someone who is a previous tenant, and then you're going to ask those references questions about the landlord, so you're going to really be able to get to understand who the landlord is and what the property looks like and feels like.
Thank you so much.
Julie, I'm sorry, but we also have on our website, we have the apartment selection checklist under Prepare, and that's a pretty comprehensive list that when you go in, you can look at, like, does it have a fireplace? Does it, what's the water pressure look like? What's the cooking, like the stove, whether or not that's electric or gas? It really prompts you to ask questions so that you can you can understand the whole apartment as well. So that's a great resource for you to weigh your pros and cons as well. Thank you.
There are a lot of resources on our website that, that Denise has referred to a couple already. So it's really important. Our website is an educational website. When you go on, yes, you can search for an apartment, which is really important, but there are a lot of tools you should read too. There's what we have that I feel is very important. It's a security checklist. And again, if you have a chance to look at the apartment, when you look, you go around and you check the locks, you check the doors, what kind of locks are on the doors. But if you don't, if you aren't in Ithaca, those are good resources for a buddy or a mentor to also have. So there's all these kinds of checklists. There's a lease signing checklist. So does the lease, what does the lease say? So don't look, when you go onto our site, the first thing to do, don't go look for the apartment, but look for the tools to help you have that successful experience. So when you do sign that lease, you do have that successful experience for a year period of time before you either re-sign or look for a new living arrangement. So, is it possible to ride a bike during the winter? So, to class, or anywhere around Ithaca. So, if anyone has a bike, can you talk about that experience?
I have a bike, and I personally don't ride it during the winter. So I see occasionally people doing that, but not very many. It's depending how the winter is. Like, there's often the roads are just too snowy for it to be reasonable, I think. Although I know one professor who bikes to campus year-round, and his commute, it's the professor whose house I lived in once, so I know his commute, and it's like along a road that gets cleared quite reliably. So possible, but not popular.
Anybody else have a bike?
I have actually seen several students bike to campus during the winter, even in our bad weathers that we've had. A lot of the buses will have a thing in the front where you can actually, a bike rack where you can put your bike on as you come up a hill or across campus. But I do see a lot of students who bike during the winter months on campus specifically.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. So are there areas to avoid while considering off-campus accommodations? And I think this is more of a personal question, so I don't know if any of our graduate students would be willing to answer that question, because it is going to be depending upon, the resources you have, like a car and transportation. So if anyone would like to address that. I'll talk a little bit about it, So I do find there are areas that not a lot of graduate students live in, but I would say, Ithaca is a fairly friendly community, and you can certainly go on and look at any kind of, if you're looking about safe neighborhoods, there are criminal records and police records that you can obtain. But I would say a lot of our graduate students, definitely clusters of graduate students, pick certain areas of Ithaca. There's an area called Fall Creek, which is downtown Ithaca. We don't have any representatives from Fall Creek, but it's an area that it has fairly good bus service to campus. Some people walk from the Fall Creek neighborhood up the hill. And the other reasons people like Fall Creek, if you have a family, they do have an elementary school that is right in the Fall Creek neighborhood that is in walking distance. And it's also in walking distance to downtown, the Commons. The Commons is what we call downtown Ithaca. There's lots of kind of boutique shopping downtown. But my favorite part of downtown is all the restaurants. We have a street called Aurora Street, which is nicknamed Restaurant Row. And so that's a very common area where graduate students live. There's also apartments on the commons above the stores. So if graduate students, if you could talk a little bit about maybe what the commons for you, if your living areas are close to the commons, and things that you might like to do that involve maybe downtown Ithaca.
So I guess I actually lived downtown in Fall Creek for a year, a few years ago, and it was really lovely, as Cindy said. I'm actually moving back to Fall Creek in a year, and
raises in New York or Los Angeles or Seattle.
Sorry, what?
Okay, Veronica, you're all set now.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying I lived downtown and in Fall Creek for about a year, and I'm actually gonna, 4 years ago, and I'm going to move back to Fall Creek next year. And because the Commons is the Commons in downtown area is where if I'm going out to eat with friends, it'll usually be there. Going out to bars at night, it'll usually be there. It's a lovely place, easy to walk around, and yeah, so Fall Creek I know a lot of people who live down there. Fall Creek and downtown are popular for grad students. It's compared to where I live now on North Campus, it's a bit of a further commute up to campus, but there's a very convenient bus route that runs every 10 minutes during the day. It goes up the hill. Or you can walk. It could take 25, 30 minutes. It's a nice walk. I've also biked up the hill, which is a bit difficult, but fine as well.
Thank you. Another area at campus where we don't have a representative is the East Hill area. And if we have any vet students watching today, East Hill, it also has a shopping area. A lot of people who live in East Hill do walk to campus, but there's really good bus service from East Hill as well. In fact, East Hill is a neighborhood that has very late night, well, late night for me. It goes till after midnight, probably to 1 or 2 in the morning. So East Hill is also a great area to live. There's a shopping center with a supermarket. There's a couple of restaurants in the East Hill Plaza shopping area. And the other piece about the East Hill, because a lot of vet students live in East Hill, it is an area that if you want to have a pet, there are some apartments in East Hill that do accept pets because a lot of our vet students who live do like to have pets. But I've mentioned it for vet students, but it's a very common area for a lot of students to live in East Hill. The other area where we don't have a representative is the area called Bell Sherman. And Bell Sherman is right adjacent to College Town. And it's also within walking distance to campus. So have any of you ever lived in Bell Sherman? And I know
yes, I've lived in Bell Sherman.
Okay. Why don't you talk about Bell Sherman?
When I was an undergraduate, I lived in Bell Sherman. It's not really, I didn't see too much difference between that area and College Town. I had lived in College Town literally the semester before, and so it basically just moved a little bit further. So I thought that it was just when I was mentioning before that I was having my walls shake, that was because of the proximity to a fraternity house. So when I moved it to Bell Sherman, it was just a little quieter. So when before there was the question about which areas to avoid, there's also you have to ask what it is that you're trying to avoid or what it is that you're trying to find. If you want something that has more of a nightlife, or you want to make sure that you have more restaurants around you, or you're more concerned about quiet, or you're overly concerned that there's going to be too much quiet and it's going to be disturbing for you or frightening if you're there late at night. So it's what you're trying to avoid. I was basically trying to find the quietest area possible. So I really like Bell Sherman.
Thank you. Another area that some of our grad students live in, but not a lot, is the South Hill area. So you might see a lot of listings for South Hill, especially on Craigslist, because that is the area where a lot of Ithaca College students live. So you'll certainly find other Cornell students in the South Hill area, but not many. So if you do see South Hill and a lot of openings, that is close to downtown. It is walking distance to downtown from a lot of areas, but it is highly Ithaca College. So just to give you that information. So this is a little bit about winter. We actually had a fairly mild winter in Ithaca, but I know some of our grad students were here last winter and 2 years ago. Were some more difficult winters. So how about Sonia? Do you want to speak to, is living off campus troublesome in the winter?
Yes. Fortunately, that I didn't spend a whole semester at the first place I was mentioning, which was very far, and it was 1 hour bus route, and it was not convenient. And I was here for the first time, and I didn't like living in the woods, and I was feeling unsafe, although I know that Ithaca is pretty much safe. So I was fortunate that I hadn't signed a lease, and my other housemates, they gave me an opportunity to look at another place and shift. So I stayed at that place for 1 month and shifted before the winter really started. So I shifted to College Town. It was 2 streets away from the main College Avenue, and it was a little further from College Avenue, like 5 minutes more walk, and it was very doable, and I had a good semester during winter as well.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to talk about winter for them? So I've lived in Ithaca for a number of years, and just some good information, Cornell hardly ever closes. So no matter how hard the day might be, and you can look outside and see a foot of snow, Cornell itself won't close, but pay attention because your professor might cancel class. But Cornell, we might have a delayed opening. I think the last time, I've been here for like 28 years, and the last time I think Cornell closed for a whole day was in 1993. So just to give you a taste, they do keep the roads. I feel like the roads get cleared in Ithaca proper, and even I live out in the village of Lansing, which is about the 10-minute ride that Jason has into campus. And the roads do get clear, and the buses do run. It's actually when the buses don't run and they close the streets that Cornell will close. So as long as the buses are running, but they will be delayed in the winter. And there are a lot of rules around winter. So for instance, if you live in a certain apartment, if you live in a house especially, I live in a complex, everything gets cleaned. But if you live in a house, it might be, the lease might say that it's up to the tenant to clean the front steps of the house and the walk going to the house. And the landlord might be responsible for cleaning the sidewalks of the house. So it's not just getting around in the winter, it's also your responsibility in keeping clear pathways to the front door of your living arrangement. So that's another thing to consider when you're signing a lease. Do I want to be responsible for cleaning the sidewalks in the winter, or do I want my landlord or property managers to be responsible for cleaning the sidewalks in the winter? So those are things to look for. I'm from the Northeast, so the winter, for the most part, doesn't bother me. But, you know, you definitely think about where you want to live and what you want your responsibilities to be. And I don't know if Denise, do you have anything to add about that?
One thing that I personally would add is that it would, like Devesh said, using Google Maps in the Street View. I think it's important that, for personally, I wouldn't want to walk on a street that doesn't have a sidewalk. I know others feel that it's perfectly acceptable, and that is. I mean, it's not against the law to do that. But when it's snow and ice, I would prefer to be walking on a sidewalk so that I know that I'm not walking in any way of a car or a bus. So it's definitely, you know, being really cautious about your own personal safety.
So Dolly, you've been here for a really long time. Do you have anything to say about winter?
Yes, being Nigerian, you know, winter in Ithaca was not my favorite when I first arrived here, but you definitely can adjust. One thing you should probably note is never put away your winter coat too early. My sophomore year, I was taking, I think, my penultimate final. It was May 9th, and I went outside and I looked up and it was snowing, so I had to run back inside into my apartment building and go grab my winter coat. So sometimes winter can be a little extended. It can be a little unpredictable, but we also have, really gorgeous spring and summer. When it really warms here, it's really scenic. It's a real privilege to be here. Even in the winter, it is as well. But the cold is definitely something to be mindful of. So you should make sure you have a lot of warm clothing packed for that to be prepared.
So I know as grad students, many of you will be here 12 months of the year. And Ithaca has the best late spring, summers, and early falls than you can ever imagine. So I know, we've talked about the winter, we've talked about some of the challenges, but it is worth being here because of the other 3 seasons of the year. So if you can have patience with winter, you will make it because the summers all make up for it. We're surrounded by state parks and lots of places to walk, even campus itself. We have beautiful paths on campus, so you don't even have to get to the state park to take those really nice walks. So this is definitely a question that's an opinion. And so, and I know we have a variety. Jason lives in a complex, and Veronica lives in houses, and Sonia, I'm not sure exactly your living situation. But generally, is it better to rent from a company or an individual landlord? And so I will let, Sonia, why don't you start?
So it depends, because the first apartment where I moved in College Town, 2 streets away from the College Avenue, I rented it from a private lady landlord, and she was really, really nice. She had a proper security check to give the apartment to me, and she talked to she was very considerate, and she had the fully furnished apartment, and she cared a lot for me. And I had a very good time with her, and I still have a very good relationship with her. The next time where I shifted, where I got a sublet, it is through a renting company, and the renting company manages everything. I don't need to worry about disposing of the trash and nothing, so just the electricity bill. So it is less of responsibility when we live in a complex or apartment setting where it is managed by a renting company. But when I was living in the private building, I had to think about all the utilities and cleaning and trash disposal and everything. So it depends. It differs the level of responsibility.
Thank you, Sonia. So Veronica, would you like to speak to that also?
Sure. So I have never lived in a place that's run by a bigger company, so I can only speak to the individual landlords, but I've had great experiences with them so far. Twice the places I've lived in were like someone's personal house, that they were either renting out rooms or the whole house. And that was, I guess, that was nice in both places. Both the people, families were great and like cared about the house because they either lived in it or were going to live in it again, so they were personally invested in the upkeep. The other places including my current place, are managed by an individual landlord who manages multiple properties. They tend to be small, like a house with only 2 to 4 units, as opposed to a big complex. And both of them have been great as well. I know them personally, like very just easy to work with, willing to fix whatever needs to be fixed. So I've had great experiences there. Where I'm about to move is someone's house that, like, it's the only place that the landlord manages. It's just her family's home, and she lives abroad. And my friends who live there now say that that's a really good experience. But I've had other friends who lived in a place in a similar situation. It was just like one person managing one property who was not great at it at all and didn't really know what she was doing. So I guess if you're working with someone who like only manages the one property and is not a professional landlord, maybe really talk to someone who's worked with them before or lived in their house before, so that you know what it's like. So I can't say that the individual landlords are better than the companies, just that I've had good experiences with all the ones that I've lived with so far.
Oh, thank you. So Jason, I know you live in a complex, and Jason, I would just want to start by saying it is difficult. There's something going on with the sound, but if you could try to talk a little bit about the complex experience.
Okay, yeah, I really enjoy the complex experience. I've had a great relationship with the I don't want to say landlord, but the leasing office agent, if you will. And yeah, I mean it's nice because I remember early on the key didn't quite fit the lock, and I was just too timid to ask somebody to fix it. But when I finally did, it was just painless. Like, they take care of the management. They take care. It's well maintained. They're very friendly, and yeah. I do have one friend, and I mean it's the roll of the die, right? Where he had an individual house that he was living in, and the woman who owned it, her son just didn't like him, and he was asked to move out. So, I mean, that's one full experience.
So we have about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to ask just one more question. The one thing I want to add to that, get to know your property managers or landlords, because the relationship you build will really help when you need that something fixed, because you become more than, oh, there's a person that wants something fixed. So build that relationship, and I think I've heard that through the different people that have answered the question. So let's see. I want a short question. Let's see. Okay, I think Jason has the answer to this. What are the best neighborhoods for an older grad student with a partner and a dog? And this is going to be the last question, and then we're going to just close out of this session.
Okay, I would actually say that the Lansing area is good for that kind of thing. I've noticed some of the complexes in this area, they were almost exclusively for kind of the older with partners or children. I see lots of children in my complex. I know my particular one doesn't allow dogs, but other ones do. So I would say aim for more of the neighborhood like areas like Lansing are.
And one of the other things to ask about animals is to ask most apartments will require a pet deposit, so to ask about that. And then there's some properties that not only require a pet deposit, but they might add something to your rent each month. So that is also something to ask if you want to bring an animal. As I mentioned earlier, vet students, not all vet students, but a lot of vet students will live out in East Hill, and they particularly do look for living arrangements where they can bring animals. So I just want to thank everybody for being with us today. Just a reminder, this will be posted on Cornellcast. So if you missed any part of it or you want to go back to it for any reason, please look for it on Cornellcast. And I really want you to remember to use our site, offcampusliving.cornell.edu. It does have a search feature, which is really important, but provides a lot of education materials. And the PowerPoints that Denise has created for you will really provide you the tools to guide you to that successful off-campus living experience. I want to, again, congratulate you, welcome you to the Cornell community, and we really look forward to meeting you upon your arrival to Ithaca. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I want to thank our 5 graduate students and Denise, and a special thank you to Diane Kupirik, our Director of Marketing for our division, who has really supported us in this endeavor. Thank you, everybody.